Well. After over 2 years of starting to review the Ratchet & Clank series, it's all going to come to an end. We've had a roller coaster journey, beginning with the original trilogy. I don't have a copy of Ratchet & Clank 1 and 3. The spin-off game, which was alright, the future series was good, and the rest can crawl itself into a hole and die. But like a roller coaster, the ride has to eventually come to a stop. And that brings us to the final Ratchet & Clank game we're going to be looking at, and that is Ratchet & Clank on PlayStation 4. They honestly should have just called this game Ratchet & Clank.
Hashtag got enough to buy a pixelizer.
Before we start, a little bit of history first. After Into the Nexus release, the momentum for the duo suddenly stopped. There wasn't any news or rumors regarding the next Ratchet & Clank game, and many other gamers have moved on to more storytelling and or online competitive games. But then, out of nowhere, a trailer was released for the Ratchet & Clank movie, which was unexpected but exciting at the same time. And before the movie was just going to be premiered in a theater near you, Insomniac announces the next Ratchet & Clank game. But this time, this game was going to be the game that's based off the movie, and the movie that's based off the game. Sounds weird. As for me, I was all in on the idea. Just as long as the movie is a commercial success, then I will have absolutely, positively, 100% all your money back guaranteed, no problems with the—
Oh my goodness!
Okay, so the movie itself was a disaster, in my opinion. But we're not here to talk about the movie. Well, not yet anyway, but more on the video game. Now, when you look at this game, the PlayStation 4 version is technically a remake to the original Ratchet & Clank game on PlayStation 2. So when it comes to remakes, your top priority is to make sure that the remake is on par or even better than the original game. And the one question comes to mind. Despite the movie being a major flop, does this game exceed expectations? Well, let's not waste time. We have one more Ratchet & Clank game to check out, and it's about damn time that we finally finish off the series. Life is too short, and there's plenty of other games I want to discuss right now, and I can't do that unless this game has been reviewed. The story begins with a prisoner named Shiv Helix being moved to a cell with his roommate being Captain Quark of all people. Quark finds out that a video game was being made based on his last adventure, and he gets upset that no one will be able to hear his side of the story.
I'd like to hear your side, Captain.
And it's at that point when you realize that Shiv doesn't really have a purpose for the entire game, as he's only here just to move the story along. And with that little scene done, we commence with Ratchet. He dreams about joining the Galactic Rangers, and regardless of doing a great job at the tryouts, he doesn't get the part due to his size. Because hey, size matters. Okay, I will stop that joke! Later on in a factory in Planet Quark 2, we see the bad guys for this game. Chairman Drek, his lieutenant Invictor, and— oh, wow, that's interesting. I didn't know Pickle Rick was in this game. Why didn't you all tell me? Oh wait, is that supposed to be Dr. Nefarious? Oh god, this can't be. Dr. Nefarious just turned himself into a pickle. He's Pickle Nefarious. Well, anyway, we see a robot who turns out to be a defect, and Drek orders Victor to kill him. The robot escapes and crashes into a planet where Ratchet just so happens to be present. He saves the robot just in time before the ship explodes. Ratchet names the robot Clank, and with the information Clank gives out, they work together to stop Chairman Drek's plans of galaxy domination. I pretty much have little to no comment about the story, as for the most part, it does follow the movie. And after all, half of the cutscenes is copied and pasted from the movie. You know, like the old PlayStation 1 platform games back in the day. So, I guess if you enjoyed the movie, then you'll admire the game's story. As for me on the other hand, comparing it to the original, the story here is way off. For starters, they rushed the relationship for Ratchet and Clank too quickly. In the original, they went back and forth arguing with each other on what they should do. Clank reckons they should find Quark, but Ratchet on the other hand wanted a vacation in Planet Pokitaru. And near towards the end of the game, they started to work together and become friends in the process. But in the remake, all it takes is one conversation, and that's it! Best friends forever! They both don't have any chemistry together in the remake. The dialogue they have when they talk to each other is bland, and hell, they don't even acknowledge each other during the in-game cutscenes. And if they are supposed to be friends at this point, then I am not convinced, as it looks like both of them are forced to work together. You know, the one time you're at work and you sit next to your fellow workmate who is the last person you want to talk to, and you try to avoid eye contact as much as possible. Yeah. It feels like that. While I'm at it with Ratchet, you can definitely see the character change in him. And I don't like it. Yeah, I know in the original he's not really a likable character, but this is what we called character development. He was supposed to be a hothead until he realizes the error of his ways and decides to do the right thing, making him at the end of the game a likable character. That is storytelling at its finest. But in the remake, he doesn't exactly have a personality, and he became the same old typical main character you would expect in a Disney Pixar animated film.
I'll never be a ranger.
Who are you and what have you done for the real Ratchet? Speaking of characters, I'm not impressed with what they did to Chirpin Drek. He was a serious character back in the day. Sure, he might have said a joke every now and then, but most of the time, he was often serious. But now, he's just the same villain as the last few games before, as he needs to come up with a joke. I'm just not a fan of this character change. It may sound like that I'm nitpicking, and the truth is, I am. The reason why is I believe a remake should provide a much more better experience than the original. And if it fails, then the whole game suffers. But anyway, let's see if the gameplay can bring some light to this review. And I'm glad to say it does. The graphics, man, they look so gorgeous and really beautiful to look at. From just stopping the game just to admire the environment, to blowing up enemies by using your weapons. If there's one thing that this remake does right, is the gameplay. I will admit that in the original, that one of my major problems about it is the fact that you can't strafe. Well, you technically can, but it feels weird to move around. But in the remake, I have no complaints here. The strafing is helpful, the controls to move around are tight, and overall, the gameplay is a lot more improved than the original game. It does suck that the entire game is stuck on 30 frames per second, because if the game was on 60 frames per second, I think I would have to lock the doors and put up the do not disturb sign. But as I said before, it's not that big of a deal. As for the weapons, they're great to use for the most part. You get to use the combustor, fusion grenade, proton drum, pyro sitter, and the predator launcher to name a few. And yes, you still have Mr. Zircon and the Gravitron standing by your side, whoop-de-bloody-doo. It's cool that we get some weapons from the original and the remake, like the pyro sitter mentioned before, but I think it would have been really cool if they added even more weapons from the original. Grab those weapons and replace it with other weapons that doesn't really have a purpose here. You also have the pixelizer, but I never bought it, because the seller keeps on mentioning it over and over again, and it's really annoying.
Got enough to buy a pixelizer.
In the movie, you have some celebrity stars voicing in the film, from John Goodman to Sylvester Stallone. But there was one celebrity that did bother me throughout my playthrough, and that person's name is Bella Thorne. Before I start rambling, I mean no disrespect to Bella Thorne or to her fans. I'm not trying to be a prick, nor I'm not trying to be controversial or anything like that. I like Bella Thorne, especially when I was growing up watching that Disney show Shake It Up. But every time I play Ratchet & Clank on PlayStation 4, and every time I hear her voice, I cannot help but get aggravated. It's mostly to do with how she says her lines throughout the game.
Hello, recruit. Cora Verilux here. Show us how quick you can be on your feet by jumping over these obstacles. We must have missed them during our sweep of the perimeter. Brax, you better check the Hall of Heroes and make sure they didn't make it inside. Looks like we're secure. You did well today, Ratchet. You too, Clank. I'll see you both on Core 2. Drek Industries is up ahead. Let's move. Follow me. Try crossing now.
I mean, I know this game is aimed at kids, but I didn't remember anyone talking in that structure back in the original game, or even the trilogy for that matter. Her character only appears a few times during the game, but when you do see her character, do expect some irritating moments.
Not bad for a rookie.
Rookie! Moving on to the level designs, and again, they're good. It is a remake after all, and it's just what you would expect. Some lovable, recreated levels. However, there are some set pieces that are missing and levels that have been unfortunately cut out, probably due to some levels having no connection to the story, but other than that, the level designs are good. And speaking of levels, let's talk about the transition from one level to another. Of course, I'm talking about the loading screens. The original loading screens were great. It only lasted at least 10 to 20 seconds, but seeing your ship flying by and landing into a new planet made you feel like you were on an adventure. But in the remake, all it is a picture, the name of the planet, and some text down the bottom. Why? The loading screens was a really fun part about the original trilogy, and the fact that it's been removed and replaced with this is just awful. And of course, what's a Ratchet & Clank game without a few Clank levels? Oh my god. Oh, the Clank levels. It's fine. I do, however, like the puzzle solving using power bots, and there's even a new Clank level that's not even from the original, and it's not too bad. And if you enjoyed the Clank levels in the original, then you'll enjoy what the remake has to offer. Not me though. Not me. I much rather prefer the Clank levels from a crack in time with the puzzles, and Into the Nexus is short, simple, and doesn't say it's welcome gameplay. But when it comes to this type of gameplay, I'm not a fan of it. Just a personal opinion of mine. This game also features some humor as well, but when you go through the game, you kind of realize that the jokes here are just not up to par comparing to the original. The jokes in the original were simple, and sometimes they created some jokes just for the adults. But most of the jokes in the remake has to include something relating to a real life world or a meme. Getting some weird flashbacks right about now. Really? A barrel roll? We're making that old joke now?
But first, they'd have to tackle a brain-eating zombie T-Rex.
Hey, wait a minute. I don't recall no brain-eating zombie T-Rex.
Sometimes I wish why we are still here living. Okay, seriously, can this get any worse than that?
Do me a favor. When you use it, post your thoughts on the social medias. The kids love their social medias. Hashtag Gadgetron.
Hashtag I want to die. Let's talk about the soundtrack, which in my opinion is the most missed opportunity in the entire game. Sure, the soundtrack here sounds nice and all that, but where's the remake of the OST from the original? One of the coolest things about the original Ratchet & Clank games is killing enemies while jamming out to some sick beats. But in the remake, there's not one recognizable soundtrack from the original. Where's the Metropolis music? Where's the Blackwater Cities music? It would have been really nice if they did included the soundtrack from the original. Listening to an upgraded version of the original music while going through this game would be orgasmic. But meh. What can you do? It's not like you can build a time machine or something. Hello, Professor? How's the progress going on making that time machine? There is no such thing as a time machine. Oh, okay. The board races are back, which is cool. Boosting around, avoiding explosive boxes, and winning races in a fast time. The only problem I have with it, and it may sound like a small nitpick, but this does occur throughout the entire game. And that is everyone doesn't shut the hell up. Seriously, I can't go through 20 seconds without someone talking about anything. Whenever if Quark tells me I can't breathe underwater, or Clank informing me my objective, it's so goddamn annoying. I just want to enjoy the location I'm in until I hear...
Got enough to buy a pixelizer!
Later on, Ratchet, now a member of the Galactic Rangers, they all decide if they should enter the deplanetizer. And they all decide to do so. Ratchet gets caught, sees Quark working with the enemy all this time, and watching the planets getting blown up.
The evacuation of Novalis was successful. No one was killed or injured.
Yeah, exactly. No one was hurt or injured during the evacuation. No one living in the planet at all. Everyone escaped. Just in time. Oh, that's a load of bullshit. The Trespasser puzzle is here as well, only this time around, you have the option to skip it by pressing one button. Feel free to do so, but the downside is you'll have to give up achieving trophies until you start the game all over again. It is a neat idea to punish players for not finishing the puzzle. And like every Ratchet & Clank game, we finally get to talk about the final boss. Dr. Nefarious turns on Drek by turning him into a sheep and takes charge. Before we face Nefarious, we get to face Captain Quark. The boss fight here is okay, not much to say here, but I did like the part where he used the Groovitron on Ratchet. That was unexpected. And now, here's the final boss. Dr. Nefarious is also okay. All you do is fly around shooting him. It does provide a challenge, unless if you have the Rhino, which in that case you can beat Nefarious in under a minute, ruining all challenge it tries to offer.
Volunteer detected in fusion grenade test lab. Initiating death trial.
Well, should be easy to bleep these guys.
You know, every time I try to give out my final thoughts about this game, I somehow run into an invisible wall. I want to like this game, but all the things I've seen has been unbearable. Okay. Let's see if I can try to. The best way to sum up Ratchet & Clank on PlayStation 4 is this game is a parody to a 2002 3D action platform game called Ratchet & Clank. It does try to follow the footsteps on what made the original successful, but when it goes off and does its own thing, 9 times out of 10, it fails. The gameplay here is good. Being able to explore around the recreated levels is a wonderful trip down memory lane. The graphics are great and arguably the best good-looking Ratchet & Clank game ever. The soundtrack is nice and the level designs are okay. But do I really need to explain what's wrong with this game? The chemistry between Ratchet and Clank is lost, and you can compare them to 2 pieces of wet cardboard. In other words, bland. A lot of missed opportunities, the comedies are hit and miss, everyone doesn't shut up to a point where all I can hear is Bella Thorne, a terrible meme joke, or But the question I now have to tell myself, is this the definitive way to experience Ratchet & Clank? Well, at the end of the day, I'll have to say no. Sure, the original game's gameplay is outdated, but the reason why I always come back to this game rather than the remake is the story. The journey that Ratchet and Clank go through together, being acquaintances, turning into bitter rivals, then turning into great friends that we know and love. And the fact that there's none of that here is just disappointing. But nonetheless, I can see why people like this game. It is a remake to the original game after all, and it does look great. So all in all, it's an okay video game. If you like Ratchet & Clank, get this game. Just be sure to try out the original game first. And with that said, that's it. The Ratchet & Clank review series is officially done. Unless if another Ratchet & Clank game comes out, which in that case, I'll be sure to pick that game up day one. It was fun reviewing the series, even though it took me over 2 years to finally get around to it, and I'm looking forward to whatever series I review next. I mean, just look at what I have to go through. I can start the Kingdom Hearts series, I can continue other series like Spyro, Tekken, and wrestling games. But what about the Xbox and Nintendo games? Fable, Halo, Mario, the list just goes on and on. It will take me a while to figure out what I want to do, but I can assure you that something will eventually come up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna check out what's for free on the PlayStation Store.